The stars had never seemed so cold. Admiral Patricia Lane stood on the observation deck of the orbital defense platform Sentinel Prime, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she gazed at the tactical display hovering before her. At 63 years old, she had served humanity for 4 decades, rising through the ranks during peacetime, never imagining she would witness what now unfolded across her screens. The Covenant of United Species had arrived with a fleet of 17,000 warships, their vessels arranged in perfect geometric formations that stretched across 3 million kilometers of space. They had come not to negotiate, not to trade, not to establish diplomatic relations. They had come to deliver an ultimatum: surrender or face extinction. Patricia had watched the transmission 3 times already. The Covenant's supreme director, a towering insectoid creature named Zyxthal, had spoken with cold precision about humanity's crimes: unauthorized colonization of 14 star systems, refusal to submit biological samples for the Covenant's genetic registry, violation of sacred territorial boundaries that humans had never known existed, and worst of all, the development of weapons technology that exceeded the permitted limits for a species of humanity's classification level. Classification Level 3 they had called Earth, a primitive world, barely capable of interstellar travel, possessing no standing among the great powers of the galaxy. The Covenant had expected humanity to grovel, to beg for mercy, to accept whatever terms were offered with grateful submission. They had not expected Patricia Lane to respond by telling them exactly where they could insert their ultimatum. Now the enemy fleet was advancing, and Earth's defense forces numbered exactly 247 vessels. Most were patrol craft, designed for anti-piracy operations in the outer colonies. The largest ship in the fleet, the carrier Independence, carried only 60 fighter craft. Against 17,000 warships, many of them dreadnoughts measuring over 5 kilometers in length, Earth's navy was nothing more than a speed bump. But Patricia Lane had not risen to the rank of admiral by accepting impossible odds. The door behind her hissed open, and her aide, Lieutenant Commander Daniel Price, stepped onto the observation deck. He was a young man, barely 30, with the kind of earnest dedication that Patricia had once possessed before decades of service had tempered it with pragmatism. "Admiral, the final evacuation transports are away," Daniel reported. "Approximately 40 million civilians have been relocated to the deep shelters. Another 60 million are in transit to the lunar colonies and Mars stations." "And the rest?" Patricia asked without turning. Daniel hesitated. 7 billion people can't be evacuated in 72 hours, Admiral. Most will remain on the surface." Patricia nodded slowly. She had known the answer before asking. The evacuation was never meant to save everyone. It was meant to save enough. Enough to rebuild. Enough to remember. Enough to someday somehow find a way to strike back. "The President has authorized the deployment of the last resort option," Daniel continued. "The warheads are being loaded now." Patricia finally turned to face him. "Those weapons won't stop them, Daniel. The Covenant's shields can withstand nuclear detonations. Our intelligence suggests their flagship alone could survive a direct hit from our entire arsenal. Then why deploy them?" "Because we fight," Patricia said simply. "Because that's who we are. Because when the history of this day is written, whether by human hands or alien ones, it will say that Earth did not go quietly. It will say that we stood against the darkness and refused to yield. It will say that we were worthy of the stars, even if we never got to claim them." Daniel straightened his spine, his expression hardening with resolve. "Yes, Admiral." Patricia returned her gaze to the tactical display. The enemy fleet was 12 hours from weapons range. 12 hours until the bombardment began. 12 hours until cities burned and oceans boiled and humanity's brief chapter in the cosmic story came to its bloody end. Unless a miracle happened. Patricia Lane did not believe in miracles. The alarm began screaming 3 hours later. Patricia was in the command center, reviewing deployment orders with her senior staff, when every sensor in the system simultaneously went haywire. The main display flickered, died, and then reactivated to show something that made every person in the room freeze in stunned disbelief. A spatial anomaly had formed at the edge of the solar system. Not the usual bluish shimmer of a standard faster-than-light translation, but something else entirely. A wound in reality itself, bleeding golden light that pulsed with rhythms that seemed almost organic. And from that wound, ships were emerging. Hundreds of ships. Then thousands. Then tens of thousands. "What the hell is that?" Captain Maria Santos breathed, her dark eyes wide as she stared at the cascading sensor data. "Unknown vessel configuration," the tactical officer, Lieutenant Kevin Walsh, reported, his fingers flying across his console. "Computer can't match them to any known design. There, Admiral, they're huge. The largest ones are measuring over 15 kilometers in length." Patricia watched the display with narrowed eyes. The emerging fleet was arranging itself into formations unlike anything she had ever seen. Not the rigid geometric patterns of the Covenant, but fluid, organic shapes that seemed to shift and flow like living things. "Communication incoming," the communications officer announced. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies, audio and visual." "Put it through," Patricia ordered. The main display shifted and a face appeared. A human face. A woman with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold the light of distant stars. She wore a uniform of deep blue trimmed with gold, marked with symbols that Patricia did not recognize. "This is High Admiral Catherine Cole of the Terran Ascendancy," the woman said, her voice carrying an accent that was both familiar and strange. "We have monitored the situation in this system and have come to render assistance. Earth will not fall today." The command center erupted in confused murmurs. Patricia raised a hand for silence, her mind racing as she processed what she was seeing. "This is Admiral Patricia Lane of Earth Defense Command," she responded. "I appreciate the offer of assistance, but I need to understand who you are. The Terran Ascendancy doesn't exist in any database we have. How is it possible that you're human?" The silver-haired woman smiled, and there was something ancient and knowing in that expression. "The full explanation will take time that we do not have. But the short version is this. 15,000 years ago, our ancestors left Earth to seek their fortune among the stars. We have been watching from afar, waiting for the day when our homeworld would need us. That day has come. 15,000 years. Patricia felt the blood drain from her face. Human civilization on Earth was barely 6,000 years old. The ancestors this woman spoke of would have left during the last ice age, when humanity was still learning to build permanent settlements. "That's not possible," Daniel whispered beside her. But Patricia was looking at the fleet count on the tactical display. 47,000 ships, nearly 3 times the size of the Covenant Armada. And if their vessels were truly 15 kilometers long, then the firepower they represented was beyond anything she could calculate. "Possible or not," she said quietly, "I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth." She keyed the communication channel. "High Admiral Cole, Earth Defense Command gratefully accepts your assistance. How do you wish to coordinate?" Catherine Cole's smile widened. "Coordinate. Admiral Lane, I appreciate the offer, but coordination will not be necessary. Your people have fought bravely against impossible odds. You've earned the right to rest. Stand down your forces and protect your civilians. The Ascendancy will handle the Covenant." "Handle them how?" The ancient admiral's eyes hardened. "The way we've handled every threat to humanity for the past 15 millennia. Completely." The Ascendancy fleet moved with a grace that defied physics. Where Earth's vessels struggled against the constraints of conventional propulsion, these ships seemed to glide through space, as if the void itself parted to let them pass. They crossed distances that should have taken hours in mere minutes, their golden drives leaving trails of light that lingered like the memory of falling stars. The Covenant fleet had halted its advance. Patricia watched the enemy formations shifting, saw the frantic repositioning as 17,000 ships tried to orient themselves toward this unexpected threat. But the Ascendancy fleet was not advancing in a straight line. They were spreading out, encircling, surrounding the Covenant Armada in a sphere of gleaming metal and terrible promise. "Admiral Lane," Catherine Cole's voice came through the communication channel again. "I'm transferring tactical data to your systems now. I want you to see what happens next. I want your people to understand what the Terran Ascendancy is, what humanity has become." The data streamed in, and Patricia's tactical officers began translating it into formats their systems could display. What they saw made several of them gasp. Each Ascendancy vessel was equipped with weapons systems that made nuclear warheads look like firecrackers, gravitic disruptors that could tear apart molecular bonds, plasma lances that burned at temperatures exceeding the cores of stars, dimensional projectors that could fold space itself, crushing anything caught within the effect into infinite density, and something called a judgment cannon, a weapon whose specifications were partially redacted but whose estimated yield was measured in terms of solar output. "This is impossible," Kevin Walsh said, his voice barely a whisper. "This level of technology, it would take tens of thousands of years to develop." 15,000 years, Patricia murmured. "They've had 15,000 years." The Covenant responded to the encirclement as any military force would. They opened fire. Thousands of weapons discharged simultaneously: particle beams, kinetic projectiles, antimatter warheads. The combined firepower of 17,000 warships, species who had dominated the galaxy for millions of years, directed at the upstart fleet that dared to challenge them. The Ascendancy ships didn't evade. They didn't deploy countermeasures. They simply absorbed the attack. Patricia watched in amazement as weapons that could have shattered continents splashed harmlessly against shimmering energy barriers. The Ascendancy's shields weren't just strong. They seemed to operate on principles that the Covenant's weapons couldn't even touch. It was like watching a child throw pebbles at a mountain. "Supreme Director Zeichthal is attempting communication," the communications officer reported. "Route it to my station," Patricia ordered, "and make sure High Admiral Cole can hear." The insectoid commander's image appeared, and Patricia noted with satisfaction that Zeichthal looked considerably less composed than he had during his ultimatum. His compound eyes were moving erratically, and the chitinous plates of his face were flushed with colors that probably indicated distress. "Unknown fleet, you are interfering in Covenant business," Zeichthal chittered. "The species designation human has been found guilty of crimes against the galactic community. Justice must be served. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Catherine Cole's response was calm, almost gentle. "Supreme Director, I am High Admiral Catherine Cole of the Terran Ascendancy. The humans of Earth are under our protection. They always have been. You have come here to commit genocide against our kin. I'm going to give you one chance to reconsider. The Covenant does not negotiate with—" "I'm not negotiating," Catherine interrupted. "I'm warning you. Withdraw your fleet now, renounce your claims against Earth, and you may survive this day. Refuse, and I will demonstrate why the Ascendancy has never lost a war." Zeichthal made a sound that might have been laughter. "You are outnumbered, human. Your technology may be impressive, but we are the masters of this galaxy. We have conquered 1,000 species. We have ruled for 10 million years. You cannot threaten us." Catherine's expression didn't change. "Then we have nothing more to discuss. Admiral Lane, I recommend you have your people observe what happens next. It's important that Earth understands the nature of the universe they've entered." The communication ended. The Ascendancy opened fire. Patricia had seen naval engagements before. She had studied the great battles of human history from Trafalgar to Midway to the colony wars of the 22nd century. She thought she understood what combat between fleets looked like. She was wrong. The Ascendancy didn't fight. They executed. Golden beams lanced out from the encircling fleet, each one precisely targeted, each one carrying enough energy to crack a world. Covenant ships didn't explode so much as cease to exist. Their matter converted to expanding clouds of plasma that briefly outshone the sun. The gravitic disruptors activated, and Patricia watched whole sections of the enemy formation collapse inward as the fundamental forces holding their ships together simply stopped working. The Covenant tried to fight back. Their weapons continued firing, but against the Ascendancy's shields, they might as well have been using harsh language. They tried to flee, but the Ascendancy ships were faster, appearing in front of escape routes before the Covenant vessels could reach them. They tried to surrender, but Catherine Cole had given them their chance. There were no second chances. In the command center, the staff watched in stunned silence as the tactical display updated with casualty figures that seemed impossible. 1,000 Covenant ships destroyed, then 5,000, then 10,000. The enemy fleet was being dismantled with surgical precision, each attack calculated to maximize destruction while minimizing the chance of any vessel escaping. "This isn't a battle," Maria Santos said, her voice hollow. "This is a slaughter." Patricia said nothing. She was watching the Supreme Director's flagship, a massive dreadnought at the center of the enemy formation. It was the largest Covenant vessel, supposedly the most powerful ship in their fleet. It had weathered the initial assault, its shields somehow holding against attacks that had vaporized lesser ships. Now it was alone. The Ascendancy fleet had cleared away every other Covenant vessel, creating a sphere of empty space with the flagship at its center. 17,000 ships reduced to one in less than 15 minutes. The tactical display showed the flagship's weapons firing continuously, desperately, hopelessly. A single Ascendancy vessel moved forward. It was one of the largest in their fleet, a ship that Patricia's sensors identified as over 15 kilometers long. Its design was elegant, almost beautiful, with sweeping lines and surfaces that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. "That's the flagship of the Ascendancy fleet," Kevin Walsh reported. "The Eternal Remembrance." High Admiral Cole's personal vessel. The Eternal Remembrance came to a halt directly in front of the Covenant flagship. For a long moment, nothing happened. The two vessels faced each other across a gulf of empty space, the ancient power of the galaxy and the forgotten children of Earth. Then the Remembrance fired. A single beam of golden light, so bright that Patricia had to shield her eyes even through the filtered display. It struck the Covenant flagship and the ship's shields collapsed instantly. The beam continued through, carving through the massive vessel from bow to stern. For a moment the flagship seemed to hang together, its structure still recognizable despite the wound that had been torn through it. Then it came apart. Not an explosion. Something worse. The flagship fractured along lines that seemed to follow the golden light's path, breaking into smaller and smaller pieces until nothing remained but a cloud of dust that caught the distant light of the sun. The Battle of Saul, as it would come to be known, was over. 17,000 Covenant warships destroyed, 0 Ascendancy casualties, total engagement time 18 minutes. In the command center, no one spoke. Patricia Lane stood motionless, her mind struggling to process what she had just witnessed. 40 years of military service, and she had never imagined that such power could exist. The Covenant had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. They had conquered thousands of species. They had believed themselves invincible, and humanity had destroyed them in less time than it took to watch a television program. "Admiral Lane," Catherine Cole's voice came through the communication system. "I believe we have much to discuss. Would you be willing to come aboard the Eternal Remembrance? I think it's time you learned the full story." Patricia found her voice. "I would be honored, High Admiral." The shuttle that transported Patricia to the Eternal Remembrance was unlike any vehicle she had ever traveled in. It seemed to move without inertia, accelerating to speeds that should have crushed her against the bulkhead, but left her feeling only a gentle push. The interior was comfortable, almost luxurious, with surfaces that seemed to anticipate her needs. She was met at the hangar by a young officer who introduced himself as Commander Peter Grant. He was human, obviously, with features that could have belonged to anyone on Earth, but there was something in his bearing, a casual confidence that spoke of absolute certainty in his own capabilities and those of his ship. "The High Admiral is waiting for you in the observation hall," Peter said. "If you'll follow me." The corridors of the Eternal Remembrance were wide and filled with soft light that seemed to have no source. Patricia passed other crew members, all human, all wearing the same blue and gold uniforms. They nodded respectfully as she passed, their expressions friendly but reserved. The observation hall was a vast chamber at the heart of the ship, its walls transparent to space. Through them, Patricia could see Earth, a blue and white jewel hanging in the darkness. Around it, the Ascendancy fleet maintained its protective formation, thousands of ships standing guard over the planet that was no longer alone. Catherine Cole stood at the center of the chamber, her hands clasped behind her back in a posture eerily similar to Patricia's own. She turned as Patricia entered and smiled. "Admiral Lane, welcome aboard." "High Admiral," Patricia responded. I think I speak for all of Earth when I say thank you. Without your intervention, Earth would have fought, Catherine said. That's what matters. You were outgunned, outmatched, facing certain destruction, and you chose to stand anyway. That's the human spirit, Admiral. That's what we've spent 15,000 years protecting. Patricia moved to stand beside her, looking out at the home she had nearly lost. Will you tell me the truth now? Who are you? Where did you come from? Catherine was quiet for a moment. It's a long story, but you deserve to hear it. She gestured, and the walls of the observation hall seemed to come alive. Images formed in the transparent surfaces, showing scenes from a past so distant it seemed like myth. 15,000 years ago, during what your archaeologists call the Upper Paleolithic, our ancestors were visited by beings from beyond the stars. Not the Covenant, though they existed even then. Something else. Something older. They called themselves the Architects, and they had been watching Earth for millions of years, waiting for a species to emerge that had the potential to become something greater. The images showed primitive humans, barely distinguishable from modern people, encountering beings of light and geometry. There was fear at first, then wonder, then understanding. The Architects offered our ancestors a choice. They could remain on Earth, develop at their own pace, eventually reach the stars on their own, or they could come with the Architects, be elevated, and become the guardians of their homeworld from afar. Some chose to stay. They became you. Others chose to go. They became us. Why? Patricia asked. Why would anyone leave Earth behind? Because the Architects showed them what was coming. Catherine's expression darkened. The galaxy is not a friendly place, Admiral. The Covenant is old, but they are not the oldest. There are things between the stars that make the Covenant look like insects. Things that would have found Earth eventually. Things that would have ended humanity before we ever had a chance to become what we could be. The Architects needed champions. Protectors. They found them in our ancestors. The images shifted, showing the early ascendancy. Ships being built. Worlds being colonized. Wars being fought against enemies too terrible to describe. For 15,000 years we have fought in the shadows. We have protected Earth from threats you never knew existed. When the Architects finally departed for wherever it is that beings like them go, they left us with a sacred duty. Watch over Earth. Let humanity develop on its own terms. But if the homeworld ever faced extinction, intervene. The Covenant, Patricia said. The Covenant, Catherine confirmed. They've known about Earth for a long time. They've been watching your development, waiting for the right moment to strike. When humanity began colonizing other systems, they decided the time had come. They thought you were alone. They thought you were helpless. Her smile was cold. They were wrong. Patricia absorbed this, her mind reeling. 15,000 years of history hidden from Earth. An entire civilization of humans evolved and advanced, watching from the wings. What happens now? She asked. Catherine turned to face her fully. That depends on you, on Earth, on what humanity wants. What do you mean? Our mandate was protection, not interference. We've always believed that Earth should develop on its own, make its own choices, find its own path. But the Covenant's attack has changed things. The galaxy knows about Earth now. More importantly, they know that Earth is not alone. The rules of the game have shifted. Catherine moved to a control panel and brought up a star map. Patricia recognized some of the systems, the ones that humanity had colonized in its tentative expansion into space. But the map extended far beyond, showing territories marked in blue that stretched across thousands of light years. The Terran Ascendancy controls over 10,000 star systems. We have a population of 2 trillion. Our technology is beyond anything the Covenant can match, and we are far from the only power in the galaxy that opposes their rule. If Earth chooses to join us, you would become part of something greater. You would have access to our knowledge, our resources, our protection. The path to the stars that should have taken you millennia could be shortened to decades. And if we don't, then we return to watching from afar. We will still protect you from existential threats. We will still be here if you need us. But we will not interfere with your development. The choice is yours. Patricia looked at the star map, at the vast territory that belonged to humans she had never known existed. It was overwhelming, it was terrifying. It was also the most exciting thing she had ever contemplated. I can't make that decision alone, she said. That's not how we do things on Earth. Catherine nodded approvingly. We know. That's one of the things we've always admired about you. Your messy democracy, your constant arguing, your refusal to let any one person or group control your destiny. It's inefficient, it's chaotic, but it's also resilient in a way that most civilizations aren't. It's why you've survived this long without our direct help. She placed a hand on Patricia's shoulder. Take the time you need, discuss it, debate it, vote on it. However Earth makes decisions, make this one the same way. We've waited 15,000 years. We can wait a little longer. Patricia returned to Earth with a head full of impossible knowledge and a heart full of conflicting emotions. The shuttle deposited her back at Sentinel Prime, where Daniel and the rest of her staff were waiting with questions that she couldn't begin to answer. The world had changed in the hours she had been gone. News of the battle had spread across every communication network on the planet. People had watched the Covenant fleet be destroyed. They had seen the Ascendancy ships hanging in their skies like guardian angels. They were asking the same questions she had asked. Who are they? Where did they come from? What do they want? In the days that followed, Patricia briefed the world's leaders on everything she had learned. She watched their reactions, the same mixture of disbelief and wonder and fear that she had felt. She answered their questions as best she could and admitted what she didn't know. The debate began. Some argued for immediate acceptance. The benefits were obvious. Technology, protection, a place in a galactic civilization that Earth had never imagined could exist. Why would they refuse such an offer? Others counseled caution. The Ascendancy was powerful, but they were also strangers. Could Earth trust them? Would joining mean losing their independence, their identity, their right to choose their own future? The arguments went back and forth for months. Patricia watched from the sidelines, offering her opinion when asked but mostly observing. She had spent her life defending Earth. Now she had to let Earth defend itself in a different kind of battle. Through it all, the Ascendancy waited. Their fleet remained in the solar system, a silent presence that served as both reminder and reassurance. Occasionally, Catherine Cole would communicate with Earth's leaders, answering questions, providing information, never pressuring. In the end, the decision came down to a simple truth that Patricia had recognized from the beginning. Earth was no longer alone in the universe. It never had been, but now it knew, and knowing changed everything. The vote was held on a clear spring day, 1 year after the Battle of Saul. Every nation participated, every citizen who wanted to have their voice heard. And when the results were tallied, the answer was clear. Earth chose to reach for the stars. The Ascension Ceremony, as it came to be called, was held at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Catherine Cole came down from the Eternal Remembrance to attend, along with a delegation of Ascendancy officers. They stood alongside Earth's leaders in the Great Assembly Hall, two branches of humanity reunited after 15 millennia of separation. Patricia was there, in the uniform she had worn her entire career. She was retiring after this, passing command of Earth's forces to younger hands. Her war was over. A new chapter was beginning. Catherine found her afterward as the celebration continued around them. "You did well, Admiral," she said. "When the history of this day is written, your name will be remembered alongside the greatest of our ancestors." Patricia shook her head. "I didn't do anything. You saved us. We provided the means. You provided the will." Catherine's eyes were warm. "When the Covenant came, you could have surrendered. You could have fled. You could have hidden and hoped they would pass you by. Instead, you stood. You prepared to fight against impossible odds, knowing you would lose, refusing to give up anyway. That's what makes humanity special, Admiral. Not our technology, not our numbers, our spirit." She gestured at the celebration around them. "Look at them. Your people, our people. 15,000 years of separation, and we're still the same at our core. Still curious, still stubborn, still determined to face whatever the universe throws at us and come out swinging." Patricia looked at the crowd, at the faces of Earthers and Ascendants mingling together. Daniel was there, talking animatedly with a young Ascendancy scientist. Maria Santos was examining a holographic display that one of the officers had brought. Kevin Walsh was simply staring at everything with wide eyes, like a child at his first carnival. "What comes next?" Patricia asked. "Everything," Catherine said. "The galaxy is vast, Admiral. There are wonders out there that you can't imagine. Civilizations that have existed for billions of years. mysteries that even we haven't solved, challenges that will test everything humanity has to offer, she smiled. And now Earth gets to be part of it all. Patricia considered this. A year ago, she had been prepared to die defending a world she thought was alone in the universe. Now that world was part of something greater, something that stretched across the stars. It's going to be quite an adventure, she said. Catherine laughed, a sound that carried the weight of millennia and the lightness of hope. Admiral Lane, you have no idea. Outside, the Ascendancy fleet still hung in the sky, a constellation of ships guarding the world that had given birth to them all. In orbital shipyards, the first collaborative projects were already beginning, Earth engineers working alongside Ascendancy designers to build a new generation of vessels that would carry humanity to distant stars. In laboratories around the world, scientists were receiving data packets containing knowledge that would revolutionize every field of human understanding. Medicine, physics, engineering, philosophy, the accumulated wisdom of 15,000 years of advancement, freely shared with their long-lost cousins. In homes and schools and workplaces, people were beginning to dream bigger dreams than ever before. Children drew pictures of starships. Students chose careers in space exploration. Elders who had thought they would never see beyond the moon now spoke of visiting other galaxies. The Covenant's defeat had sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Powers that had ruled for millions of years were reassessing their positions. Species that had lived in fear were finding hope. And at the center of it all, humanity stood, no longer divided between those who had stayed and those who had left, but united in a single purpose. Earth had stood alone against the galaxy. Then the true human fleet had arrived. And now, together, they would write the next chapter of their shared story among the stars. Patricia Lane walked out of the assembly hall into the evening air. Above her, the stars were beginning to emerge, points of light that no longer seemed so distant. She had spent her life looking up at them, wondering what secrets they held. Now she knew, and the adventure was just beginning. 50 years later, Admiral Patricia Lane passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 113. Modern medicine, enhanced by Ascendancy knowledge, had given her those extra decades. Enough time to see the first Earth-born starship complete its maiden voyage. Enough time to witness humanity establish colonies in 3 new star systems. Enough time to know that the choice she had helped make was the right one. She was buried with full honors, her service to Earth recognized by billions. But her true monument was not a grave or a statue. It was the future she had helped create. A future where humanity reached across the cosmos, finding new worlds and new wonders. A future where the children of Earth and the children of the Ascendancy worked together, building something greater than either could have achieved alone. A future where the spirit that had made Patricia stand against impossible odds lived on in every human heart. The galaxy had thought Earth was alone. They had been wrong. And in the generations to come, as humanity spread across the stars, they would never forget the moment when they discovered just how wrong their enemies had been. Earth had never been alone, and it never would be again. The end.